welcome to the first ever episode of Limitless, the podcast that makes the impossible possible. I'm Alex O'Neill, obviously quite excited, and today I will be talking to you about growth mindset. When you want to make a big change in the world, there are two things that need to happen. You're going to need to take action steps in some way for sure, whether that's creating something or forming a community or planning or asking people for something. However, before that there needs to be a change within you. I'm guessing you're here because you have the desire or the idea to create change, but it's not happening for you yet. And this is where we need to enter the brain. The brain is a wonderful, complicated and still largely unknown lump of stuff that sits inside your head. Scientists have spent years trying to understand it, firstly in a physical sense by having a look at it, poking it with stuff, cutting it up and scanning it, and then through trying to decipher thoughts, feelings and language via the owner of the brain. There are still many, many things we don't know, but one thing we know quite a lot about now is how it changes and grows over time. Okay, here's a sciencey bit. When you were born, your brain already contained about 86 billion neurons, which are teeny tiny cells that create a network in your brain, a bit like a spider's web. Before we are even out of the womb, these neurons start connecting with each other, firing little electrical signals as our brain learns and develops. The more the neurons fire, the stronger the connections become. And thus, over the years, it creates a giant complicated net of what are called neural pathways. Some of the strongest pathways are used to remember physical actions, like walking, talking and feeding, which is why we don't wake up every morning having to remember how to do these things. We practice them every day, and so that strong pathway remains. Other strong pathways are formed to remember things like emotions or learned reactions to things. Maybe you're scared of spiders. This will have been a pathway that was created when you were little by seeing someone else's fear of spiders, or possibly because you saw one and it shocked you, and therefore was seen as something unknown and dangerous, even though it actually posed no real threat. Well, I live in the UK, and the worst that can happen from a spider over here is an uncomfortable bite, so perhaps wherever you are, that pathway makes more sense. The pathway development also encompasses how we feel about ourselves, our position or our abilities. If we've been told or seen demonstrated over many years that we are clever, stupid, clumsy, weird, funny or nervous, then these neural pathways, the ones that demonstrate behaviour that coincides with these beliefs, will be much stronger than others. It may feel like we just are these things without questioning whether we can learn to be different. It's commonly misunderstood that once we are past our school years, new learning becomes difficult or even impossible. We might see ourselves as someone who just can't cook, or will never be able to understand maths, or is just an angry person. A few years ago, the scientist Dweck coined a term which, if you've been near a school lately, you will probably have heard. It's called growth mindset. Through a number of experiments with children and adults, she found that the brain actually continues to grow and change throughout your entire life. Whilst the makeup of the brain is different in children and adults, the ability for neurons to fire together and make new connections is still alive and well right up until the day we die. In fact, some research has suggested that continued brain development can stave off dementia in our later years. In addition to this, she found that whether we think our brains can change and grow actually makes a difference to whether it does or not. She found that people who have a fixed mindset who think they know everything there is about something or that they can't learn any more generally won't. And those that believe that they can learn and change their brain unlock the ability to do so. What this tells us is our brains never lose the capacity to learn new things across the entire spectrum of possible things to learn. Sports, intellectual topics, languages, dance, playing an instrument, relationship skills, emotional regulation. Through trying and failing, we can continue to learn anything new that we want for as long as we like. And when we currently can't see an answer, we have the ability to one day suddenly see a solution we've never seen before. Okay, here's a challenge for you. Next time you find yourself saying in your head that you can't do something, or it's not possible for you, write it down on a piece of paper. For instance, maybe you think you've been spending a lot lately and you're just not good with money. Write down, "I'm not good with money," on a piece of paper. Now, underneath, rewrite that as a statement starting with, "I can learn." So, for instance, I can learn to be good with money. Finally, turn this into a question starting with, how can I learn? So, how can I learn to be good with money? Now, start brainstorming ideas under here. Perhaps you could take a course, spend some time researching on the internet, or ask someone you're close to. You could copy actions of those you see who are good at that thing. Start acting like someone who is good with their money, and suddenly your neurons will be firing along new paths, and before you know it, you actually are someone who's good with money. This whole concept changed my life because I could see all these ways in which people thought that they were past it and stuck in their ways once they left school, or children and teenagers who took on this persona of not being good at a particular subject. And suddenly I realised that all of that was an imagined mindset and not actually real. I've always been someone who loves change and learning new stuff, but gaining this understanding of growth mindset blew my mind on what was possible for me. I wasn't someone who would forever be nervous when meeting new people, or not very good at making decisions, or a people pleaser. I just had a brain that was wired that way, and I saw the opportunity to rewire it and experience a whole new way of being. So, with that in mind, let's take growth mindset and change your way of being. Thanks for listening to this episode of Limitless, the podcast that is making the impossible possible. I'm Alex O'Neill, and I would love to hear what you think and what you thought of this episode. So come and find me in my Patreon community at www.patreon.com/limitless community. I'll see you in the next episode. If you want to dig a bit more into growth mindset, then I highly recommend you read Carol Dweck's book called Mindset, Changing the Way You Think to Fulfill Your Potential. She's also done a really good little TED Talk, which is titled The Power of Believing That You Can Improve. So, check those out and come and tell me what you think in the Patreon community. I'd really love to hear from you.